This tutorial is to help you with the home loan case study. The first thing you need to do is go on the internet and do some digital shopping. This can be hypothetical, or it can be something that might be helpful in the future if you're already looking at a home. So, and you can go anywhere wherever you need. So I just picked someplace in Rexburg and I just found a house. There's nothing in particular. I was just doing this to help with the tutorial. So the first thing I did was fill in my house information here. Should be listed on your website. Give us a style, the county. If it's not in Idaho, give us kind of a location, square footage, how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, and approximate square acreage. Then to give us a picture of the house, you'll notice if I try and paste into this this text box here, it actually doesn't paste very well. So I'm going to come over here, copy the image, and just paste somewhere in the document, and then size it down and just move it into this text box. You don't have to try and actually paste it inside there. It doesn't. There we go. Okay, really easy points to earn and kind of silly to leave it, so make sure that you get in there. The next thing is to go through the mortgage details. You can pick a bank here, Bank 1 or Bank 2, or you can use details from your own bank if that's more applicable to you. The one thing I do want to make note is that you do the exact same bank from both so that you can do a compare and contrast between the ending balance or the amount of interest here in the 15-year and the amount of interest here, and the only difference will be the interest rate and the mortgage details, not the bank, so that you throw in another variable for comparison. If you're doing it for your own sake later, then you can go back and change whatever you want. I think I'm done with that right now, so I'm going to cover that up and move into this. So you'll see after you pick a bank, then through this, it gives you the details of Bank 1. I just chose Bank 1 because it was fast, and it has all of the details in these boxes that you can just type in really quickly. And again, just so that I can compare Bank 1 again with all of the mortgage details. All right, now I'm going to come double check that I have everything over here. We did 1 and 2, so now we're going to work on the 15-year mortgage in number 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is go with the house listing price. And oh, I do need to have that back over here again. Oops. There we go. 449.9, and we're going to type that in. Okay, so then now I think I have everything over there. Now I need the down payment, and you'll note that it gives me some tips off to the side for these. And so that down payment tells us that it's about, like, most banks are going to ask about 20%, but as you can see, there's lots of different options at different banks. I'm going to go ahead and go with the 20%. So we're going to do equals 0.2 so that I can calculate times the list price, and that'll give us our down payment. Closing costs are what we found down in step number 2 over here, and our closing costs are 1 point of the loan amount. Plus, we also have these closing cost fees here. And so we need to add both of those in. The closing cost point is actually a percent. And since it's being represented as a whole number, we need to divide it by 100 to make it calculate as a percent when we get up to our closing costs. So I'm going to come up here to our closing cost. And if you forgot all that, it gives you this little tip off to the side. So we're going to do equals our closing cost fees, which are down here, and then we need to add that to the percent, our 1% of the loan amount. So we'll reference this one and divide it by 100 to make it a percent, and then multiply it by the loan amount, which is our house cost, our listing price, but we already paid some. So we're going to subtract the down payment, and that will be the the loan amount that it will calculate the closing costs. Now, don't forget to put the cost of the house subtracting the down payment for the loan price or the loan amount in parentheses, or it will only give me 1% of this, the house price, and then it will subtract the down payment. So that ends up being wrong. So that's how we calculate the closing cost. Now the total loan amount includes the closing cost. So to do this, and if you get confused, it also gives you your formula there. So we take our house price, we subtract what we paid for the down payment, and then we add in what we will have to pay for the closing cost. And that ends up being our loan amount. Now the APR is given to us down here, so I'm just going to cell reference that so that if I go back in at a different time, maybe in the future to do a home loan on my own, I can just change this information here, and all of these are cell referencing this, and so it'll change everything for me because all of these are cell referenced. Okay, the next one, I just need to know how many months for the term of the loan. Because this one is the 15-year mortgage, I'm going to do 15 years times 12 months every year gives me how many total months. Now I need to calculate the monthly payments, and again we're going to cell reference everything so that I can go back and change this, and it makes it so much easier to in the future look up something and adjust things for your own benefit. We're hoping that you can keep this and use it in the future. Even if it's not for you, maybe a friend or a child in the future who you need to help work through maybe making some mortgage decisions. So here for the monthly payment, we're going to type in PMT and our rate. We're going to cell reference here. We could cell reference here as well. It doesn't really matter either one. Because this, you know, is your base place that you need to change everything. I'm just going to reference this one, doesn't really matter. And make sure that you always divide that by N, and in this case it's a monthly payment, so N is 12. Okay, the number of periods, I could do 15 times 12 because it's 15 years, 12 months a year, or I can just cell reference here, which is already been done, 15 times 12. Now the present value of the loan is our total loan amount right here. And the future value we want to be 0, so I can just leave it because Excel will automatically know that that's what I want, or I can type in 0. It's up to you, and you don't need to worry about the type. That's just whether you're making the payments at the beginning of the month or the end of the month, so I'm just going to leave that off. I could close the parenthesis, but there's enough information here that Excel knows how to calculate that for me. Now you'll notice that it's in red or negative. That's because that's what Excel automatically does because this is a payment formula. But we're going to be working with calculating with this, and so I want that to be a positive value. I can do that by making my present value negative, or I can just put a negative out in front of the payment. Either way will make this a positive number that I can work with down here in my amortization schedule. Next will be the total payments, and again we have our tip off to the side that helps you, or the hint, and that's just how often you're going to make this payment. And so we're going to be making this monthly payment every month of every year for 15 years, which will be right here, 180 times that I make this payment. So we're going to do equals this payment times how many times I make that, and that tells me how much money I put towards the bank for this loan. Now, because my loan amount was smaller than that, the difference between these will give me the total interest that goes towards the bank for this loan. So I'm going to take what I end up paying over the entire lifetime of the loan and subtract my total loan amount, and that will tell me that I end up spending $117,000 in interest towards the bank over 15 years. Now I know we should probably go on to the amortization schedule in number 3, but because it is so similar for the 30-year mortgage, I'm just going to go ahead and figure that out as well, just so that you get this twice in a row, maybe it'll help solidify the process so we don't have to do everything at the same time. Now, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cell reference the house over here so that in the future, if you want to change your house price, you just have to change it in this cell here, and it's just faster because it'll change everything for you. The down payment, again, is going to be 20%, and we could calculate it here. We could cell reference here. It's up to you, whatever you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and just calculate so that you get another go at calculating the 20%. So 20% is 0.2 times the amount, and that will give me my down payment. Now the closing costs are different for the 30-year mortgage. Here we have a fixed cost of $1,700 and a I think this is 2.5 in this one. So I'm going to actually show that because there was only one decimal here. It rounded it up to 1.3, and I like seeing all the decimals on that one. So just you can do the increased decimal there. Okay, so we're going to come up here and calculate this one. We cannot cell reference over here because it's a different mortgage detail. And I need to cell reference the closing cost amount, that's the fixed rate. And then I need to add my closing cost points here, but I can't just leave that. It needs to be changed to the decimal. So again, divide it by 100. Now this is going to be multiplying the loan amount, or how much you end up needing for your loan, which will be the house price minus the down payment. And just like we did before, I'm going to put this in parentheses so that it'll give us our calculated home price minus the down payment, and not doing the order of operations. If I didn't put those in, it would just times the 1.25% times the house price, or the house listing price. And we've already paid some money on that, so we want to do that. Okay, so the next one is the total loan amount, which will be our house price, but I already paid some, but then I have to do the closing costs for all of the loan, and that will now be the entire loan amount that I need to pay off over a 30-year mortgage. The APR here, I'm going to cell reference again down here so that again, in the future, if you want to go back through this, you can change that. It makes it so much easier. And so we cell reference that. Now, the term, the loan amount of term, or the term for the loan in how many months will be 30 years, and every month in those 30 years. So it's 12 months times 30 years, or 30 years times the 12 months. Either way will tell me that I make 360 payments for the entire term of this, the loan. Next, we need to calculate the monthly payment. And so to do that, just like on the other one, we need to type in PMT, and I can do a negative at the front, or I can do a negative present value, so that this ends up being a positive number for our calculations. And to do that, I'm going to get out of the way now and do a negative just because. Now the rate we have here, so I'm going to cell reference, and we're going to divide by N. In this case, it's a monthly payment, so it's 12. And then number of periods, we already calculated here, 360 times that I make this payment. And the present value is our loan amount here. Don't go back to the house price because we had some other calculations, so I want this loan amount. And because I already did negative here, don't do a negative here because I already took care of it. Future value, Excel already knows it's going to go to 0, and type we don't need to worry about. I could close a parenthesis, but I'm just going to press enter because it's fast. And that makes my monthly payment. And you'll notice that because the difference in the details of the loan or the mortgage, it changes that payment. Even though it's with the same bank, because the terms are different. Now the total payments again will be how often I make this payment times how often I make that for the entire life of the loan, and that tells me over here I'm going to spend $674,892. And so now I need to subtract the total payments, how much I pay over the entire life of the loan, and subtract what I got my loan for, which was this one here, and what's left over shows me how much money goes towards interest over the 30 years towards the bank. And you'll see a difference here between the 15-year and the 30-year. 15-year usually has a better interest rate, and because you're only paying half the amount of time, much less ends up going towards interest. Now we can go through the amortization portion where you get to see month by month what actually does happen. So our beginning balance will be the loan amount here, and we're just going to cell reference that and call it good. The next one is we want to know how much of our first payment, our first mortgage payment, goes towards the interest versus the principal. Now, our interest rate is right here. So here's our interest. And again, make sure you divide it by 12. And then we're going to times it by the beginning balance here. And that tells me that I end up spending $1,182 in interest this first month. Now I would like to click and drag all the way down to my term loan, which would be 180 months. And so to do that, I want to continue referencing this APR right here. And when I click and drag, that's going to drag with me, and it'll reference this cell, then this cell, then this cell, and this cell as I move on. To prevent that, I want to do an absolute cell reference. And so that is function F4 for, I believe, Mac and PC. It's your F4 button, and if I toggle through those, you'll see it changes. So be careful that if you do that, you do it the first one. Or you could even just do this by hand and put the $sign before the letter or the column and a $sign before the row. This says always stay in this column, and this says always stay in this row. So if I changed this to here, it would just always stay in row 12 and change the column. If I did another one, it would always stay in column T, but change rows. And one more gets rid of it all. And this just says always reference column T and always reference row 12, which kind of like Battleship says, this will always be my cell reference for this calculation, which is the absolute cell reference. Okay, now I did not absolute cell reference this one here because as I click and drag, I want my beginning balance to change with me, which is good because it should be going down. So don't absolute cell reference that one. Now to find out how much money goes towards principal, we'll take our monthly payment and subtract how much interest was calculated, and that tells me how much money is now going towards the principal. So at the end of the month, here was my beginning balance. This amount of my $2,679 went to the bank to pay them for loaning us the money. Then this right here is how much comes off of our total principal. So I'm going to subtract that, and that gives me the ending balance, which tells me at the beginning of month 2, this is my ending balance. Now, I'm going to come back to this one here. You'll notice that I cell referenced the monthly payment, and again, I want that to always be the monthly payment. So I'm going to highlight that and press function F4, or as soon as you type it in, you can just press F4 again on the difference between the PC and the Mac and make it the absolute cell reference. Or if you're not comfortable with that, just go ahead and do it by hand by doing your Shift 4 before the column and the row. Now that that is absolute cell referenced on those, I'm going to just click and drag this and make sure that that actually worked. Well, so far it looks good, but I'm going to double click in here and make sure. So it did continue to cell reference the APR, that was good. And it moved with the next month, which is good because it went down a little bit. And so that'll continue to reference the cell next to it. Again, I'm going to click this one and drag down and make sure that this was correct. Good, it continued to reference my monthly payment, and it went down to subtract a little less in interest this month so that a little more went to principal. And this one as well, going to click and drag and double check here, which is good. I needed to subtract everything in month 2. So now this whole thing is correct. I can click and drag this whole thing down to 180 months, or a tip here is to just go highlight 2 of these so that Excel understands the pattern that it's increasing by 1, and drag this all the way down to 180 months to here, and then come back up. Now that row 2 or month 2 is perfect, everything in here is correct, I'm going to left click and highlight all of those, come down here in the right hand corner, get the crosshairs and double click, and it will fill it in all the way to the end of where I said to go, which was 180 months over here. And you'll notice at the end of that it went to 0. If you did not cell reference and you rounded up here, if you rounded and you typed in 2,679 for the payment, it would be rounded just enough that at the end it actually won't zero out. So please make sure on all of these to cell reference everything over here. It is more accurate and it is faster. And if you want to go back and change this for something in the future, you don't have to go back and type in numbers here. You just have to change your base things over here in the mortgage and your house listing price. So that is how we do the 15-year mortgage, and same thing over here on the 30-year, except that instead of going down to 180, we're going to go down to 360. So we're going to go for a while. Whoops, a little too far. Go back up to 360 here, and then when we double click in the crosshairs, it will go all the way down to the end of our 30 years. Let's get our first month worked out over here. Our beginning balance will be, again, as before, our total loan amount equals this. And then, so because I am referencing my loan amount, I don't want to try and click and drag my first month, because this one here needs to cell reference the end of month 1. So I do need to do kind of 2 rows so that I get this all worked out first, and then drag my second month. Okay, again, interest, I have my APR, and because I want to absolute cell reference that, I can type in F4 or function F4 depending on your computer, and multiply this to the beginning balance, and that tells me how much goes towards, oops, oh, I'm so glad that I did that so that you guys can see what happened, because I noticed I'm not going to be paying $16,000 in interest that month, especially where the monthly payment is less than that by a dramatic amount. I noticed that something was wrong, and I hope you guys caught it. I need to divide this by n, and in this case, n is 12 because it's monthly payment, and that looks much better. So one of those things that you can make sure as you're watching and troubleshoot things as you go, and make sure it makes sense. Okay, so now to find the amount that goes to principal, I take my monthly payment and subtract the interest, what went towards interest, and that will tell me how much will go towards what's left over to come off on the principal. And again, this right here, just like before, I want this absolute cell referenced. So function F4 or F4 or whatever your computer is, and so that it will absolute cell reference the payment here. Again, for the ending balance, we will take our beginning balance and subtract what came off of the principal, and you'll notice it was a lot less than that came off on the 15-year mortgage. Now I need to reference for month 2 the ending balance that happened at the end of month 1, and then I'm going to double check all of these to make sure that all of them are clicking and dragging correctly. Double click in here. I am referencing my APR and the beginning balance for month 1. So the absolute cell reference worked. I divided by 12. I'm going to press enter to get out of the cell. Don't try and click somewhere else or you'll cell reference something else. And here, whoops, I want to click and drag here to make sure everything's working. Double click in that. Yep, I'm referencing my monthly payment and the interest next to me. And then here I want to make sure that this is dragging with me so that it changes every month, which is good. It needs to continue to go down. And that looks beautiful. Let's highlight all of those and then double click in the bottom right hand corner and check that I get all the way down to 0 at the end of my 30 years. Scrolling down, yep, it looks great. And again, that won't go to 0 if you do any typing of numbers because it will round it slightly and you need to cell reference, which makes it so much faster anyway. Okay, so that's how you get all of this set up, and since this is such a long tutorial, I'm going to do a second one to do number 5 over here.